There's talk now about a new restructuring the American military supply relationship with Israel to end the congressional involvement in it, privatize it, basically, and persuade American defense companies to produce in Israel or jointly with Israel, so that political support for Israel is not necessary to continue the military support. Now, this is what is going on. I mean, that is not a stupid maneuver on the part of the supporters of Israel, but it is an indication of how much damage Israel has been doing to its own survival. And we come back to the point that for the United States, this war with Iran is a war of choice. It's not existential. The United States is not going to disappear. We may suffer some pain, but we're not going to disappear however this war turns out. But for Iran and Israel, it is existential. I mean, Israel has made it existential for itself. Iran has made it existential for Iran because Iran does not want to return to a situation, will not agree to return to a situation in which it is subject to renewed attack by Israel, backed by the United States. The only way this war can end, from the point of view of Iran, is, as Iran has said most recently, in a three-phase process. First phase, there's the general agreement on peace in West Asia, and there are guarantees, credible guarantees, against further attack on Iran by Israel and the United States. That if that can be achieved, then Iran is prepared to sit down with Oman present, evidently, to talk about the future rules for using the Strait of Hormuz. But it won't do that until there's been a general peace agreement. If the Hormuz issue can be resolved satisfactorily from Iran's point of view, then it was prepared to talk about the nuclear program, but only then. And here I want to make an important point. The last time any Iranian leader said Iran does not want and will not build nuclear weapons was February 11th. Since February 28th, there has been no reiteration of the pledge not to build a nuclear weapon. Why? Because the people in Iran who want to build a nuclear weapon, who feel that a nuclear weapon is essential for Iran's deterrence of further attacks by the United States and Israel, are now in charge. And so, of course, you're not hearing this. And a lot of the discussion that we're seeing internationally, zero enrichment, the IAEA talking about resuming control of Iranian enrichment programs, moving enriched uranium to Russia, as was under the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action of 2015, this was done. This is all extremely unrealistic because there's a lot of evidence now that if Iran hasn't actively decided to build a bomb, it intends to do that. It has the motivation to do that. It has the United States and Israel have deprived the opponents of a nuclear Iran of their arguments. So now Iran, inspired by North Korea, is, I think, going to produce a nuclear weapon, and the means of delivering that, probably not just to Israel, but also to the United States. So, which is what North Korea has done. So I'm waiting to be refuted by an Iranian government statement repeating the fatwa, which, by the way, had an escape clause in it. It said that if Iran's existence, the Islamic Republic's existence, was threatened, that the ban on building weapons of mass destruction would be lifted. I think it has been lifted. What exactly is being done underground in Iran, I do not know. But I take very seriously the comments of our friend Ted Postal, who says that Iran is entirely capable of fabricating nuclear weapons in a matter of weeks, not months. Maybe it has already done so, as he suggests may be the case. We don't know. But I think the focus on the nuclear program by the United States and the international community is a false focus. I don't think, from the Israeli point of view, the Iranian nuclear program was the reason for this attack. I think the reason was the Greater Israel Project, the obstacle that Iran represented to that, Iran's status as an enemy of Zionism, and a desire to shatter the Iranian state one way or another. The nuclear issue was an excuse, in my view.
Yeah. Ambassador, we had UAE, leaving OPEC, and they were the founders, one of the nations, one of the countries who founded OPEC, and right now they're leaving OPEC because of the difficulties they're facing, because recently they were running out of cash in UAE. And many people would argue, people were surprised. And what is happening? 40 days of war with Iran and the United States, they're not part of the war. They got hit by Iranian missiles, but they're not basically part of the war. And how this war has influenced their economy to the extent that they're running out of cash in UAE. And how do you understand the behavior of the government in?
Well, I think the petrodollar is, in fact, a major factor here. They are running out of dollars, and I think they basically told the United States Treasury that they were going to start pricing oil in Chinese currency and paying in yuan, and that would destroy the petrodollar, basically, which is the prop for the American financial hegemony globally. So this is why you're seeing talks of dollar swaps and so on with UAE, because there's a great deal at stake for the Treasury of the United States if the UAE is unable to finance its imports with dollars. So this is, and turns to the Chinese currency or other currencies, not necessarily the Chinese currency, because I don't think we're headed into a world in which there will be a dominant currency as the dollar has been dominant. I think we're going to head into a world in which there are multiple currencies operating, including probably some that are artificially created between different countries. Maybe the BRICS will finally come up with some kind of currency that is used in trade among their members, voluntarily at least. So there are other factors here, and let me mention a few of them. Obviously, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are at odds. Saudi Arabia is the big daddy in OPEC, and the differences between the Emiratis and the Saudis on a multitude of issues, whether they're in Yemen or Somalia or Libya or more generally Syria, are now acute. There's also the issue of the Abraham Accords, which the UAE seems to be committed to, but which everyone else sees as discredited by this war. So I think, well, there's now a focus on the UAE dropping out of OPEC, and that will have some effect. It will marginally increase the non-OPEC oil production, not enough to counteract the effects of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the American blockade. Of course, Iran's blockade is selective. If you make peace with Iran, you get to go through. The American blockade is absolute, basically, because the Iranians won't let unfriendly countries through, and the United States will stop stop Iranian ships from going through, or the allies of Iran from going through. So, in effect, there's a total blockade. It's not effective, but there it is. So there's that. I think the bigger issue is the UAE leaving OPEC is, in effect, also leaving the Gulf Cooperation Council. the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, was established in the wake of the Iranian Islamic Revolution as a counter to Iran, on the principle, sound principle, that collective defense was necessary against revolutionary zeal of Iran in those early days. The GCC has never been very effective as a coordinating body, and it's had problems internally. Oman has always been odd man out in the GCC, maintaining in the Iranian context a position of neutrality. But there are issues, for example, again involving Iran, during the Islamic Revolution, when the American diplomats at the embassy in Tehran were taken hostage and held for a year by Iranian students. The United States mounted a failed rescue attempt from Oman, I think from Socotra, without informing the Omanis. And as a result, for 10 years, Oman and the United States were at odds militarily. Oman condemned Kuwait for its acceptance of American military protection during Operation, I can't remember the name of it, Enduring Freedom, which was the escort of tankers through the effects of the Iran-Iraq War. So Oman has always been different. It is structurally different in the sense that while it has oil and gas, it is less endowed with that than others. It is a different society. It has always looked outward toward East Africa and South Asia. It had an empire which included Zanzibar and Mombasa and other places, and northern Mozambique. So Oman is different. Qatar is different also. Qatar shares a gas field with Iran in the Persian Gulf. Qatar has no alternative to maintaining decent relations with Iran. That, among other things, plus the Al Jazeera's presence in Qatar, which annoyed everybody else because it was reporting accurately on their politics, even if it did not report accurately on Qatari politics. That led to a rupture between Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar within the GCC. And that went on for, 3 years before it was fixed. Bahrain has been under great pressure from the Shiite majority. It was part of the Safavid Empire. It has a relationship with Iran that is quite tense, and it's now garrisoned by Saudi and other troops from the GCC. So the GCC, which gives an appearance of being a big tent, is not, and it is very divided. I think the UAE's departure from OPEC and the tensions between the Saudis and the UAE and Qatar are very likely to cause the GCC to, if not disintegrate, lose any effectiveness it has had. So all of this plays into the basic motif, which is that Iran says to the members of the GCC, you cannot have American bases on your territory and be safe. If you have bases aimed at us on your territory, we reserve the right to attack them. The UAE has 2 major bases on its territory from the United States. And that is one of the reasons it was so heavily attacked. It was very much involved in the American attack on Iran. So was Saudi Arabia to some extent. All of the Saudis didn't want to admit it, and their help was very limited. They also were involved in it. And Qatar was the location of Al-Udeid Air Base, the biggest air base for the United States in the region. That is essentially destroyed, as I understand it. So Kuwait, several bases. I think the American forces have had to move to Bubiyan Island, which has been under Iranian attack. And Anyway, final point here, and that is you were asking about Israeli reaction to the war. I don't think ordinary Israelis have any idea about the level of damage that Iran inflicted on their country. I think they know whatever they saw with their own eyes or heard about from their neighbors, they know about, but they don't know the national picture. I don't think the American public has any idea of the level of destruction that has been wreaked by Iran's attacks on these bases in the region and the level of destruction, which gets back to the question of how much has this war cost? I think if you talk about immediate costs, the estimate you mentioned of $50 billion is probably much closer to the reality than the other estimates. But there's been a cover-up of by everyone except Iran. Iran, perhaps because of the national tradition of Shiism celebrates victimhood. It's all about martyrdom and so forth. Iran has been quite open about the damage it has suffered. Everyone else has covered it up. And when this war is over, even if it isn't over, I think you're going to see each GCC country adopt a sovkeeper, each for his own interest policy toward Iran, and there will be deals struck by countries in the region, probably by Qatar first, but I think the Saudis and others will have to strike a deal too. Let me make a final point, and that is Turkey has been greatly strengthened by this war, and not just in terms of its influence in places like Qatar, with which it shares an affection for the Muslim Brotherhood, but more generally, the fact that Turkey is part of this quadrumvirate, Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, is very significant because Turkey has an advanced military-industrial economy, and the countries in the Gulf are going to be looking for more actively than ever for alternatives to dependence on the United States, for the simple reason that the United States has not only proven unable to defend them, but unable to defend itself in the bases on their territory. And those bases have become a justification for Iranian assault rather than the defense of those countries. So I think we're going to see a very active diplomatic phase here following the war. And I'm not sure what will be left of American influence in the Persian Gulf when it's over. Even Israel seems to be trying to move away from overdependence on the United States, as I mentioned, with the restructuring of the defense logistical relationship.
Ambassador, what do you make of the Iranian foreign minister going to St. Petersburg, meeting with Vladimir Putin? What is happening, in my opinion, with the war in Ukraine and with the war in the Middle East? You see Russia during the war in Ukraine meeting with Xi Jinping as equals. Two partners are talking today. With the case of Iran, I see the same thing. You don't see that sort of, that they have the upper hand or they have the leverage, but these are two equal states meeting with each other. On the other hand is the case of what has happened in that meeting and the talks, and later on we had a phone call between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, which was initiated by Vladimir Putin, as it was mentioned by Russian media, or Russian in Kremlin reported on that Vladimir Putin called Donald Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this is very complex. First, let me say that it doesn't surprise me that Iran and the Russian Federation, or China and the Russian Federation, should meet as equals, because what we're talking about here is partnerships, not alliances. And the United States network of alliances basically has an imperial quality to it. That is, the United States is always on top. And that was the case when the Soviet Union existed. Its allies were below it. There were no relationships of equality. But relationships of equality in the new, as I call it, multinodal system that is emerging are the norm, not the exception. So I don't find that remarkable. Why should Arakchi go to Moscow, to St. Petersburg? Many reasons. Russia is valuable to Iran as a source of support, not just militarily, and the military supply relationship is now robust, but politically, in terms of support in the United Nations, for example. And I suspect more broadly, if Iran's strategy is to take advantage of mounting international opposition to the American blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and to the war itself, then it may look to be a partner with Russia in organizing an international campaign against the United States. Finally, of course, it's well known that Donald Trump, for whatever reason, has a relationship with Vladimir Putin, and it's in Iran's interest to energize that relationship to try to persuade Donald Trump to find a mutually convenient end to this disaster, the disaster of the war. Why would the Russians receive Arakchi? Well, for many reasons. For one thing, they are watching the United States make a huge mistake by attacking Iran. They have every interest in maintaining a position of influence in the south, their south, which is in West Asia. Iran is a key partner in West Asia. That was the case in Syria under the Assad government. It's still the case in the region as a whole. Russia has many reasons to want to have a good relationship with Iran, and basically to be helpful to Iran because it's storing up obligations on the part of Iran to support it in its time of need. So this is a mutually beneficial interaction. The same is true, by the way, of the Iranian relationship with China. China has a major interest in restoring the post-World War II international system based on international law and consensus. China is obsessed with its own sovereignty, and it supports the Westphalian concept of sovereignty for everyone else. The United States has abandoned that respect for sovereignty, and the attack on Iran is an effort to destroy Iranian sovereignty. So from the point of view of just general statecraft and interest in the international system, China, and to a lesser extent Russia, have an interest in supporting Iran on the legal front, on the political front. Of course, one assumes that China is also very wary of offending countries like Saudi Arabia that are not close friends of Iran, and therefore it tries to balance relationships. Russia doesn't have that concern, so they're different. But I think, what we're seeing is more evidence of the emergence of an order in which middle-ranking powers, now armed with drone technology and missile technology, have the ability to stand off militarily superior powers and have the diplomatic ability to enlist other major powers in qualified support. So that's what we see here, I think.
when it comes to Donald Trump's briefing or the way that he mentioned the phone call between the United States and Russia, he said basically he was repeating the same thing that he said. I remember when he was elected, he had a phone call with Vladimir Putin. He said the same thing just yesterday as he said before, when in January or in February 2025. So, and looking at Donald Trump's through social, just checking all these posts, you don't see any sort of reality. It's all about making rhetorics or somehow
No, it's
basically
posturing.
lies.
It's
And
posturing, and my theory, Nima, is that Iran has somehow sent troops and occupied part of Donald Trump's brain, and he's negotiating with the Iranians inside his head. And the Iranians inside his head are very reasonable people from his perspective, because they do what he wants. No, I mean, I think he is detached from reality. He's concerned only about himself. He's not concerned. That is part of the reason for the tensions with Israel that I mentioned. He's really all about Donald Trump and not about Israel, not about Iran. He doesn't. I'm sure he could find Iran on a map now, but I think after he did that, that would exhaust his knowledge of Iran. So, there's no evidence he's learning anything from the bumbling he's doing. And that is very depressing to me. He's the president of my country. I feel endangered by that.
before wrapping up, Ambassador, you look at the alternative media, they're basically mostly are talking about what is going on with the foreign policy of the United States diplomats. And we had the Biden administration. I remember Anthony Blinken going to Israel. He's just mentioning that he's a Jew. Instead of saying, I'm the Secretary of State of the United States, I'm here as a Jew. And coming to the Trump administration, everything is getting worse. You have basically two real estate deal makers, from New York, and trying to do diplomacy, which doesn't make sense for anybody, Russia, China, and Iran. And they're so much confused with this sort of, attitude on the part of the Trump administration. What is happening with the foreign policy of the United States and diplomats as a basic sort of tool to communicate with other countries?
Well, the United States is demonstrating that we are not capable of statecraft under this administration at the level that we were previously. I would argue that the Biden administration was also incompetent in statecraft, but we have reached a new low in these capabilities. Part of statecraft is diplomacy. The institutional base of diplomacy in the United States, which is the Department of State and the United States Foreign Service, in which I served proudly for 30 years, have been destroyed, essentially. Sidelined. The best people have left. Those who are there are being subjected to ideological boot camp, thought reform, and they're basically paralyzed. Donald Trump has no policy process in place to advise him. He has institutions. He brings them into the room. It's not clear. He listens to them. It's clear that this war with Iran was not supported by the military. So he makes decisions, and he's the sole decision maker. That was not true in Iran, even under Ali Khamenei. He had to make compromises with other elements in the Iranian system, which was designed to create checks and balances. The checks and balances are gone in the United States. The Congress is subservient. No, here we're past 60 days, and the War Powers Act requires the Congress to approve the war. The Republican chair of the committee responsible for this says, well, he's not disturbed by the law. I mean, what kind of a statement is that? constitutional government, rule of law, checks and balances are all gone. The Supreme Court is politicized and reliably supportive of the Trump administration. The Congress is missing in action. The president is on his own. Marco Rubio is mostly absorbed, apparently, in preparing to take Cuba somehow, and not engaged. And even if he were, there's no evidence that he has any diplomatic skill at all. So to go back to your point, we're represented internationally by two New York realtors whose only qualifications are their crony relationship with Donald Trump, or in the case of Jared Kushner, a relationship by marriage, and their unabashed Zionism. We are never sure whether they're representing the United States or representing Israel, and they are part of the dwindling body of Americans who imagine that Israeli and American interests overlap and are not in conflict, but they are in conflict. And we're seeing that, and this war is demonstrating that. So as a diplomat, as a student of statecraft, I am frankly appalled by the current situation in Washington.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Well, you must be a masochist if you think that was fun.
Yeah, it's the reality. We cannot change it. We can talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Ambassador.